Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host, Tre'Shon Diaz, for another episode of Tuesday Takes. We are here to get into the Falcons' offensive line, which, in one way, very much the same. 4 out of the 5 starters slated to return. That's always great to see, especially if the offensive line is good. If the offensive line's not good, it's less desirable. But in this case, it is really good. Drew Dahlman exits. Ryan Neuzil enters, who did actually start for 9 games last year, so not entirely new starter there either, but a lot of competition potentially behind him for the depth roles, especially at center, but also at offensive tackle and all up and down the roster. We got a lot to get to. This is a packed position group, and of course we got Tre'Shon here to help us get through this one. Tre'Shon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and enjoying these sunny days, before the darkness that is the NFL season rolls around. But you know what? I think this is the year, Kevin, that the light shines through, and that maybe, just maybe, the Falcons get into the playoffs. But it's going to start with the 5 guys up front, and I'm excited to talk about this group. I think it's going to be interesting. Like you said, it's 4 out of the 5 same guys, but there is a new element to it, and I think once we kind of get into it, we can really break down and kind of see how different this group could be this year.
Yeah, there will be some changes, I imagine, especially with Zach Robinson coming into his second year. I imagine they're going to want to diversify the run game a little bit more, but who knows? A new center. So that's obviously going to mix things up as well. So we're going to get to all that today, guys, talking about the starters, of course, but also the primary depth guys, and also all of these UDFAs and veterans and a rookie as well that are competing for practice squad and more, perhaps, because the Falcons brought in a ton of offensive linemen this summer to compete. So we'll see if they can unearth any diamonds in the rough here. And I'm sure, this has kind of been their specialty. They've been able to kind of find guys, good depth guys, basically. And I think the Falcons as a whole have had one of the best sort of offensive line rooms in the NFL since Dwayne Ledford's been here. And it's really a backbone of the team. So hopefully that continues. We don't see too much of a drop-off with Neuzil, but that'll obviously be one of our primary topics on today's show. Before I forget, guys, I want to bring you a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball is in full swing. Football season's right around the corner now. We're just, I believe it'll be 2 weeks from Thursday, something like that, maybe 3 weeks from Thursday. That we will, of course, get the first training camp practice, July 24th. So, exciting stuff. We're almost there. BetOnline's got more ways than ever to stay on the action with the latest news, odds, and scores, even live in-game betting. Unfortunately, there are no, as far as I'm aware, BetOnline could change this. There's not, training camp completion props, as far as I'm aware. Now,
we're working on it.
Yeah, if we can track, we're going to track those numbers for you in case BetOnline ever decides that, because we all know the most important thing from training camp is the completion percentages of the quarterbacks. But, you can also bet on real things that exist, like MLB, UFC, tennis, NFL futures, real NFL futures, not, this stuff we're talking about. BetOnline, of course, remains your top choice for sports wagering info. They've also got the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, live slots, all that stuff. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to that website today, betonline.ag, to take advantage of their new loyalty program. It's called the VIP program. They've got level up bonuses, weekly cash boosts, all that cool stuff. And when you sign up, make sure to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get access to the latest promotions. Bet online. The game starts here. All right. So before we dive in, do want to remind folks we will be at training camp this year. Adnan will be there, I believe, for the full 2 weeks, up to and including the joint practices with the Titans. So he will be on site, which is great because he actually lives in Atlanta, so it's a lot easier for him to get there than me. I will be there, I believe, the first 3 or 4 practices through like maybe Monday or Tuesday. And we will also be having a live fan meetup and possibly a live taping, depending on the cooperation of the internet and so on and so forth. We're still finalizing the exact details, but I believe at this point we could say it will likely be on Saturday the 26th in the evening, maybe like roughly 6 to 9 p.m., something like that. And we'll give the final details, including the location and all that, as soon as it's all been fully hatched out. Don't want to jump the gun on that too much, but if you're interested in coming, pencil in that evening time frame on Saturday the 26th, which of course is back together Saturday at training camp. So if you're going to training camp, that's probably the day you're trying to be there anyway. And we will release more details and more information about that event. We had a lot of fun, obviously, a couple years ago when we did it. Looking forward to getting to see you guys and hang out and maybe do a live recording. Last year we got almost thunderstormed out when we attempted to do that. So we'll see if the gods cooperate this time. But a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing that again. And fun. Hopefully fun training camp. Hopefully fun season. And that does start, like Tre'Shon said before we got started here. It all starts up front, and it's been a priority for this team basically throughout the entire Fontenot tenure that the offensive line is going to be the engine. Like, they're going to make sure the offensive line is strong enough that it's not going to be an issue. And I think they've even elevated it beyond that to where it's been a strength of the team lately. But we do have the 4 returning starters in the 2 offensive tackles, Jake Matthews at left, Caleb Gary at right, left guard Matthew Bergeron, right guard Chris Lindstrom. Center is the one spot that is sort of open, even though we're kind of expecting it to obviously be Ryan Neuzil at this point. But yeah, where would you like to go first in terms of the starters, Tre'Shon, in this group?
Yeah. Let's start on the outside and work in. Start there. We'll start with the tackles. Because that seems to be the group that when we look at all these like free agent signings, they signed like quite a few of just these like gargantuan 6'7" guys. You got Brandon Parker, bringing back Storm, Caleb McGarry, who's the mold for that, and then we got Jack Nelson in the mix now. So it was like tackle was a position they really wanted to go after. And is there a reason you think they kind of went so hard at the tackle depth, Kevin? Does it have anything to do with just maybe they're just trying to think ahead? They know that there's some people that could potentially depart. We saw really good play from Norton last year, but maybe they're just trying to get more competitive there. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely onto something with that. And this team does love to just like churn. Like, I think that's one of Terry Fontenot's sort of like ethos things, is that he's going to churn the bottom of the roster constantly, looking for those marginal gains. And that's, I think, really wise, because it doesn't cost you a lot of money. Bring in a lot of guys. If you bring guys in, I'm sure these guys are all fine. Like, I don't think anybody's like disappointing them, but it's like, okay, we think we can maybe get a little bit more from this guy, so we're going to move in a different direction or what have you. And they do this like constantly. Obviously, we're going to see it, I'm sure, within the first week of training camp, we're going to see some churn. They do it through the preseason. They do it through the regular season too. And some of that's injuries, some of that's not. But some of that is that ethos. But I think you've locked into an important thing here, which is Caleb McGarry remains unextended. So this is a contract year now for McGarry. Or maybe it's not. Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it is. I'm getting I'm getting too far down the over the cap like chart. It's like, wait, it's 2026. No, it's still 2025. Okay, we're not skipping a season. We're not doing that. This should be a good one. We don't want to skip it. So Caleb McGarry remains unsigned in 2026. So if they could unearth someone to take over that spot, I guess a la Ryan Neuzil in this situation, where they felt comfortable enough in that guy to move on from their very expensive starter, then I think that's absolutely something they would consider doing, particularly, with the note that McGarry is obviously a much better run blocker, and he is now protecting the blind side of a left-handed quarterback. How much does that matter to the Falcons? How much will it matter this year? Kind of hard to say. I mean, McGarry obviously, I think, did fine in Penix's 3 starts, so I don't think it's something the team's worried about. But if you're going to hand out what's likely to be like a $20+ million extension for a good offensive tackle like Caleb McGarry, that just seems to be the going rate these days. They may very well feel like, well, could we go to Storm Norton and get basically the same pass pro? Yes, we'll lose some run blocking, but we're going to save, $15 million a year if we do this. That might be worth it to them. And if they're going that route, like say they're going the Storm Norton, we like Storm Norton as our future starter route, which would be kind of risky considering when he has started, it's not been very good. Let's be honest. He's looked way better in Atlanta than he's looked anywhere else. So maybe this scheme just fits him.
Those Chargers days are rough.
Yeah, that was some rough tape. But that could be that maybe they like the idea that I'm sure they're not planning to move on from Storm. Like, it's unless someone else comes along and just offers him like a starting contract. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. I think this is a great situation for him. The rest of this might be sort of, if we are going to go to Storm, or we're just sort of evaluating our options for after Caleb McGarry, we need like another guy then. Like if Storm's not going to be our swing because he's going to start, then we need a new swing and we need more tackle depth because Jake Matthews, not as old as people think, or we'll talk about Jake in a second. People feel it seems like people talk about Jake, they feel like he's like 1 foot out of the NFL. I don't think that's the case. Remember he's got the bloodlines of guys that have played an eternity in the NFL basically. So he very well could do that. I think guys like Jack Nelson, you mentioned Brandon Parker, these are all guys that maybe they want to see if they can sort of find another swing tackle or see if they can develop another guy to compete to start in the future. And I think that's sort of where they're at with McGarry. And McGarry, I think obviously could still play his way into another contract in Atlanta, but I think they're keeping all their options on the table at this point. And the fact that he hasn't been extended is kind of, at least they're considering other options. Otherwise, I think the deal, they probably would have tried to get it done, earlier. So,
yeah. And, I think there could be some raised eyebrows and some scoffs at the idea that Caleb McGarry is a good tackle. But, let's make it very clear that Caleb McGarry is indeed a good tackle. This is something that you and I consistently talked about last year, but he is like the, at worst, 15th, 16th best starting right tackle in the league. But on his best day, he's flirting with the top 10 range. There's many times where we don't hear anything that goes on that side of the ball. And you already brought it up, but the man is a bulldozer. And you saw what happened when Storm comes in and Caleb's not out there. The right side of the offensive line just doesn't get that same push. So the idea that, Caleb isn't worth his current deal is very wrong, but that he could in no way get another one or wouldn't be sought after by other teams is also a little bit off base because, he's somebody who's got some youth. He's just going to be coming into his 30 year of age now. And so he's also not, he doesn't have a foot out the door. And this could be a year where, he has a really high level performance and maybe he shows them something. I get that, we've seen the lows and the lows are low. But, he's losing to TJ Watts of the league, the Brian Burns. Like, you rarely see Caleb McGarry getting taken to task by an unknown or some guy who's just not very good. And we still have seen Caleb shut down the Cam Jordans of the league and other really good players. He just struggles with length and speed. And that's just kind of something that the team has, shown that they're prepared to live with. But, with the drafting of Jack Nelson, maybe there's something that they see there. And like you brought up with Storm, maybe they like what Storm has shown them when he's come in for relief. And it's just a smart, you want to build out the offensive line like this. You want to constantly churn that position group. The state of O-line play across the league, it's something that's been constantly discussed, is that it is like just deteriorating. It's getting worse every year. It's less consistent. And overall, it is hard to find depth. It's hard to get guys who you can plug in for a couple games or for half a season. And the Falcons have done a really good job at doing that. Going back to like Art's first years as head coach, Terry's first year as the GM, and they've been able to continue that with Raheem. And I think once we start to work inwards and we get to the big position that they're taking that risk on with this year, I think we can kind of see, that they have a good track record at pulling this off and at kind of building out their O-line group.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good strategy to have. And I think that's one thing that Fontenot has really nailed is making sure not only do they have good starters, but they have depth that's not going to cause utter collapse if it has to play. And, Neuzil was obviously a great find, unearthing him and converting him to center. Now slated to start. I'm sure we'll talk about him shortly. But yeah, Storm Norton, again, a guy that was kind of cast off by previous teams for admittedly bad play, right? With bad tape. And the Falcons were like, well, we think we can work with this guy. I think he's got the tools. And in Atlanta, he's looked much better. Now, maybe that's just Dwayne Ledford coaching him up. The state of offensive line coaching in college is kind of a problem area, as well. And that trickles into the NFL. And honestly, in the NFL, the coaching could be suspect too. Like, there's not enough good offensive line coaches in the NFL. And, we've seen that happen in Atlanta.
Look, it's so bad that Chris Morgan was employed last year. Like, yes. I don't think people understand how insane that is that Chris Morgan was still getting work.
Yeah.
That is like how bad O-line coaching is right now. And I'm not saying it's an easy job, but I don't know. We got to create an O-line coaching school
Yeah.
or something just so that we can get the game back to where it needs to be, because there's only so many Dwayne Ledfords to go around at this point.
Yeah. It's tough. And so being able to develop guys is obviously highly sought after, and being able to just find guys you can insert into the lineup that don't fall off entirely is great. And at tackle, they've obviously accomplished that with Storm Norton. Thankfully, we've never had to go to the fourth tackle, which there's almost no teams that are going to be doing great when they have two backup tackles on the field, right? That's just kind of the way it is. But I think they've at least brought in guys that have, like in the case of Brandon Parker, I won't say it's great tape, but he has played, and it wouldn't be a catastrophe, more than likely, if he had to play some. Jack Nelson's a rookie, but honestly, his tape is like what I watched, like I watched a game. Okay. Like we're not talking about a deep film review here. I watched a game, watched the cut up. He looks like a very solid offensive tackle. And from what I read from the scouting reports, Jack Nelson is basically just in need of refinement. And that's kind of what's going to separate him from being an NFL starter or an NFL backup. Can he narrow in the hand placement, the foot placement, the balance, all that stuff to separate himself from the guys that are just physically talented, which he is, to the guys that are technically and physically talented, which is an NFL starter. So that's kind of, I think physically, that's why I love taking this type of tackle like in the late day 3 range, is because physically he's got the tools. He just needs to put it all together. But like, I don't know. I watched the tape and it's like, I don't see a guy that's like a liability. He needs to clean up a lot of stuff and get more consistent. And obviously NFL talent will expose that quite a bit more than college talent. But he's not like a totally raw guy or anything that I feel like if he had to play, that would be totally just a fish out of water. But ideally, I think they're hoping, obviously, that Jack Nelson is good enough to make the roster as that fourth tackle. And they can just sort of have him, get a slow start to the NFL, probably hoping he doesn't have to see the field this year, but maybe gets enough experience that he can sort of move into that swing tackle role next year if they need him to do so. Maybe eventually start. I know some people are like, oh, Jack Nelson, maybe he could start next year. It's like, okay, unless he's Ryan Schrader, the GOAT UDFA tackle Ryan Schrader, that's probably not going to happen. So, but yeah, I do think their tackle depth is in a good spot. I mean, I don't know too much about Tyrone Wheatley or Killian Zierer, who that's a sweet name. But they've got a lot of guys. I know Tyrone Wheatley has played a bit. I can't remember if he was the UFL guy or not. They had brought in somebody that was from like the XFL or UFL. I don't know if that was Tyrone Wheatley, but that was, and they brought him in like last year, and he's kind of like returned, but I don't remember. But I feel like the tackle depth is in a pretty good spot, which kind of leads us to just the other starting spot at Jake Matthews. And I feel like Jake Matthews never gets enough respect, but he's just a rock solid left tackle that's just never really going to cause you problems. And I think his, borderline elite days are probably behind him. But again, he's just a good left tackle. And I think that just gets perennially undervalued by the NFL at large.
Yeah. Yeah, the ability, one, to just be on the field as much as he has been is kind of like one of his best qualities. He's just Mr. Consistency out there. And, I know people are feeling that, we could upgrade from Jake Matthews. We could get a better tackle than Jake Matthews. And like, I don't really have any disagreement with that statement, at the surface level. Like, there's definitely tackles out there who are like better than Jake Matthews, but the problem is that it is not easy to upgrade from the 12th best tackle into the top 10. And you have to understand that you're taking a risk when you look at these other rookies and these other players. And in order to like get a guy that is in a top 10, you have to take a guy in the first round. You have to take a guy where we took Jake Matthews, and the Falcons have not had the luxury of being able to spend a pick like that just yet. They did it with Lindstrom. That was their last first round pick in the O-line, and it worked out really well. And maybe next year we see a high second, or we see them try to trade up and get aggressive with the tackle position. Maybe they don't like the results of what has happened this year, and they want to put in a more expensive investment similar to like the QB plan, and just kind of be prepared for life completely after one of or both of, Matthews and McGarry. So it's Jake's definitely somebody who, he's going to be in the Ring of Honor when he's done. Hopefully it looks like this contract sets him up to be a Falcon for life, which is, again, extremely rare to have players like that these days. And he's also now on the blind side, or not on the blind side anymore. So he gets a little bit of grace. His game is going to get to age a little bit better because, there's going to be more visibility from the QB with him. And while I don't totally buy into, fully into the whole blind side thing, because it's a lot of it's progression based, a lot of it's based on how you set your offense and your passing scheme up. There is still, a little bit of help that comes with that. And on the flip side, I know there's a big worry about Caleb McGarry being the blindside protector, but like you pointed out, he did a pretty good job last year. And again, there's ways to scheme around that blind side, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we could have, the Falcons seemed like very against doing this a lot, but you can always add a tight end. You can just have a tight end, chip. And that's okay. Yeah. It's allowed, but I know you typically don't want to do that, but it can happen. It's okay.
Charlie Warner loves hitting people.
Yeah.
Like, that's what the film shows. So I don't know, man. Let him get out there.
It checks out to me.
Fun.
But yeah, we'll see if that pans out. But I do love Jake, and I do think that if you ask me to say, okay, who's gonna be on Atlanta the longest, Jake Matthews or Caleb McGarry? I mean, Jake Matthews. I would not hesitate. Because
betting against those bloodlines.
No, he just seems, well, the fact that he's an Iron Man is part of it, but also like we've seen it happen in his family. Like so it's
dad played for nearly 20 years.
Yep.
His uncle played for nearly 20 years.
Yep.
His cousin played for a decade. I mean, between three people, there's 50 years of NFL playing.
Yeah, and like the team clearly loves him, and I think he's just basically. Like I think he'll age gracefully, and at a certain point he'll probably just get to that point where he's just like maybe just an above average starter, but I think that's okay. And you're not going to be able to have elite starters everywhere on the offensive line unless you get really lucky, like you unearth someone in UDFA or late day 3 picks, or you just are able to acquire some guys on the cheap that end up really hitting for you. But I think you can trust Jake Matthews even if he's not elite anymore, to be a cornerstone of your offensive line that you just don't really have to worry about. And that alone is just nice. Like, you can trust Jake Matthews. He'll be fine. Yes. Will he get beat by elite pass rushers? Yes. But find me an offensive lineman outside of like the top 5 guys that doesn't get routinely beat by, elite pass rushers. It is what it is. So, but yeah, moving to the interior, the Falcons are in great shape, with right guard with Chris Lindstrom, which, funny, like looking back on how controversial the pick kind of was at the time, and how much people said it was an overdraft and all this. But again, the old adage of just draft good players kind of paid off there, where it's like, yep, we think this guy's really good, so we're going to take him. And what do you know? Chris Lindstrom, I think, has a case for at least the best right guard in football, if not the best overall guard in football. But I think we can all sleep very, very soundly at night, knowing that right guard is in the hands of Chris Lindstrom. So, yeah,
a prime example of not letting positional value nerds bully you out of taking a good football player. If you see a guy that looks like an all-pro talent, walks like an all-pro talent, probably going to be one. Who cares if he's a guard? Who cares if he's center? Who cares what he plays? He's going to be on the field. It's an 11-man per side game. You need 11 people. Why not take swings at Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers if you can? And he's a great example of why investing in the O-line, regardless of position, is never a bad move. I'll never shame a GM or a team for trying to build out the trenches with elite talent, because we've seen what patchwork offensive lines look like. We've watched Matt Ryan's whole career, and we know that just trying to do that doesn't work too well. And that's why at the back half of Matt's career, they took Jake, they took Caleb, they took all these guys, because they're like, oh, hey, we should probably stop letting Matt Ryan take, top 3 hits every single season of his career. We're lucky that he doesn't break or ever get injured.
Yeah, they were incredibly fortunate to have Matt Ryan, and you could just probably repeat that over and over and over again forever, and it would still be true. But yeah, Lindstrom is just great on in both phases. Amazing run blocker, great movement ability, and an elite pass protector as well, who just rarely gets beat. And when he does get beat, it's usually miscommunications. So yeah, no one's absolutely perfect, but Lindstrom's pretty much the closest thing you can get on the interior. And yeah, I mean, it's just great to be able to just put a nice blue star on right guard. Like, okay, we have an elite player here. At left guard, I think we're still sort of feeling out just exactly how good Matthew Bergeron can be. He did take a step last year in a positive direction. It wasn't as big as I think a lot of people hoped, but Bergeron is still, I think, he's an above average starter. I think is as high as we could go at this point, which is good. Like, for a second round pick who also had to make a position change, I think that's good after a couple of years. But now we're looking for that to pay off. Or, we could go with the crazy, conspiracy theory that actually, they're just clearing the decks for Bergeron to move back to tackle after McGarry leaves, So, just saying is all.
Yeah. For me, I think Bergeron was probably, like, to me, just average last year. I think he was like you said, he took a step, but it wasn't the step that many were hoping for, or we just were expecting a little bit more, because we've talked about Dwayne Ledford's ability to develop and everything like that. Just starting off, this is a much better right tackle to left guard conversion than the last one that we saw Ledford and the gang try to pull off. So, if you just compare it
the
to
bar is very low
era, the bar is so low. He's way above that bar. Like, he's Mayfield doesn't understand how he pulled it off, but we're happy that we're at least at a place where we can be like, okay, we could play this guy. We know that he's not going to get, the QB annihilated every other play. But yeah, this is the year that we kind of need to see it all come together for Bergeron. I think that he's, I felt like he struggled a little bit more with the outside zone concepts this year, and the numbers kind of reflect it. We know that they struggled running to the left for a lot of the year. We talk about, they didn't run to the left a ton, but you kind of saw why when it would happen. They just didn't really seem to get that push. It got better when Dahlman came back. And maybe that's just Bergeron's more comfortable with Dahlman being there because he knows his steps. He knows how their zone sequence works. He's a lot more comfortable, and it just kind of, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was, but we just need to see Matt clean things up. He needs to get better with his hand placement. He needs to get better with his blocking angles. He really kind of I don't want to say over pursues because that's what it is from the defensive angle, but he kind of outruns his angles a lot, and he leaves a lot of cutback space for linebackers and other guys to really cheat inside and kind of blow up some of those runs. And that's really why we didn't see those stretch plays or any of those outside zone plays kind of getting the oomph that they did. But what I will give him credit for is that I felt like when he got inside zone opportunities, when he got more power concept opportunities, which were pretty slim, he excelled. And I think just being able to shorten his step and be able to just use his mass a lot more and a lot more immediate was something that really benefited him. So I'm hoping that we talked about it a little bit earlier, but that we really see them diversify this run scheme next year. And I'm not looking for anything, don't want to break anything that's working, but we got to go from like an 80%, 20% outside zone inside split, which is basically what we were operating at. And we got to get down to like at least a 70-30 or a 65-35. There just needs to be a little bit more diversification. That's going to help the players. That's going to help keep the defense on their toes. And we know Bijan loves running inside concepts. That's what he did at Texas. He blew them up, and we saw it. He seeks out those cutback zones, those cutback lanes in this outside zone scheme, which is great because it's set up to kind of help play into that skill set of his. But Bergeron is somebody that I feel like if he gets the opportunity to run some more power, let that man pull on a trap concept and just blow up the DT. Like, let him, let these guys move. And same for Lindstrom. I tweeted this out a couple of weeks ago, but I was like, it would be super nice to just see one GT concept with Lindstrom and McGarry just screaming across the O-line and blowing up whatever poor soul is on the receiving end. Yeah. Maybe this is a year. Maybe we kind of see them do that because I think, I I think they have the group, and I think they have the guys that they can run that stuff with. And, they just need to find, that next layer to kind of like push this run game to the elite, level that we know it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll likely see it. I mean, this is something that the Rams have begun to do a lot more of. The Rams, you remember early McVay days, extreme outside zone preference, just like a lot of the NFL was doing that.
Yeah.
And the Rams have since become, I think, one of the most diverse run games in the NFL in terms of how they mix up their run concepts. They also do a lot of kind of hybrid stuff and some of these new things. It's really fun and it works really well for them. And I think the Falcons, they're not exclusively outside zone guys. Like, I think that maybe gets a little overblown, but they're running, like you said, Tre'Shon, like 75% like outside. Like, and it's too much, right? It's a lot. And the inside running, I think, worked very well for Bijan, and because he's so good at making the first guy miss. And if he can get through the line of scrimmage and make that linebacker outside the hole or make the safety miss, that's a recipe for 10-yard game when you're running straight ahead like that. So I hope that they work it out, because I think Bergeron might actually fare better in some of those concepts. We know he's big and physical, and he's good movement skills too. But I think they do have the guard combo to succeed in that tough gap scheme inside running. Is it the biggest, like nastiest interior? No, like they're not good. This isn't going to be a man gap heavy offense, but like you said, maybe 30%, 35%, maybe like get to that level just to keep the defense guessing, because it's demoralizing when you've got this great running back in Bijan Robinson who takes the handoff for this, stretch play, and the linebackers started running outside before the handoff even happened. Yeah. Like, it's like, okay, like this is too much. Like, we can't just keep doing this. Like, if they're comfortable enough just sprinting outside as soon as they see the play set up, that means that it's too predictable. We got to do something about that. So, I think that they will. I think this is likely to happen, but it is a necessary change that needs to happen, and I think it would help Bergeron too. Like, I think he's good at that stuff.
Yeah. One counter step from Bijan will solve. Will nip those like eager linebackers over pursuing right in the bud. That's all it takes. You just gotta throw them off. Just throw a little change up in there.
Yeah, and I think that they will. And part of it, again, is like we're asking a lot of a first-time offensive coordinator. Like, I think Zach Robinson, again, I think in some ways maybe gets too much credit, but like he also was a first-time OC taking over a team that had two quarterbacks, basically, that had to play that one who couldn't execute play action or like even certain drops because of his issues physically, and like created a functional top 10 passing offense and very good running game out of that in his first season. So shout out to Zach Robinson, and hopefully now with a little bit more like time to just chill, and just kind of he can add these wrinkles in and sort of perfect what we saw there. But yeah, I know PFF was like a big fan of Bergeron last year, which they usually hate Falcons offensive linemen not named Chris Lindstrom. So I was a little surprised. And Drew Dalman, they love Drew Dalman too. So that, interesting there. But yeah, mainly I think with Bergeron, it's just the penalties. 12 penalties. That
was the only thing we didn't really touch on, was that he is the most penalized guy on the line. And so we definitely need to reel that in. And the O-line in general last year kind of had some mistakes, and that's one of the things I was going to talk about with the next guy we have. But before, when we look at this depth, anything that stands out to you? We saw Kyle Hinton get some action last year. Fine. You've got the legend Elijah Wilkinson back into the fold. So, we don't expect these guys to play. But again, I think it's just worth kind of mentioning that we've seen these guys get plugged in. We talked about earlier the team's approach to depth and that they take it seriously with the O-line. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add for those guys, but, again, just really like what we see.
Yeah, I think the guard depth is really good. I think the team probably likes Kyle Hinton too much. Like, I think Kyle Hinton's fine as a depth. Yeah. They probably like him a little too much, but like I do think Kyle Hinton's fine. He's a serviceable spot starter, which is what you're looking for. I think Elijah Wilkinson's better. So
Yeah.
I hope he gets a fair shot to overtake Hinton. I think both have a good chance to make the roster. The nice thing about Wilkinson in particular, and Hinton actually does have tackle experience as well in a pinch, but Wilkinson, I think, is actually built like a tackle and has played tackle extensively. Now, I'm not saying it was good, but he has played tackle, and that this is an emergency situation where he's like your fifth tackle, or like your extra guy, basically. If so, we don't get like a Levine Tololo situation where he has to start at tackle because you've had 3 tackle injuries in a game. So it's always nice to have that, like someone like Wilkinson that can play instead of a tight end. But I think Wilkinson's actually a starting caliber guard, and I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't gotten more shots. Now, I'm not saying anything grand about his starting ability, but he's a like serviceable starting guard, and that's great to have as a depth offensive lineman. So I think between Hinton and Wilkinson, I feel like the team's in good hands there, and there's some UDFA's and other guys competing. But a lot of these guys are probably competing for backup center more so than guard with like Hinton and Wilkinson. That's gonna be tough to climb over either of those guys, basically. I mean, that kind of does bring us to the most interesting man on the Falcons offense this year, and Ryan Neuzil, who, I'll never forget the day that he transitioned to center, and I said it like at the post practice press conference. And I was like, oh, like, what's going on with Ryan Nielsen switching to center? And Arthur Smith was just so happy that someone had noticed that they moved Neuzil to center, like on the third string team, because that's my superpower. I just, noticed that weird stuff. And, ever since, like, I don't think anybody thought at that time, like, I was like, oh, they're cross-training him. Maybe that'll help him have a roster spot, whatever. But no, he emerged eventually as the backup center after Hennessy left, and then ended up having to start quite a bit last year and was fine. I think it's pretty bold to hand the starting job to Neuzil, based on what we saw, which again was fine. But I'm a little surprised they didn't bring back Dahlman. But again, the team, I think, realized we can't pay literally every one of our offensive linemen. We're getting dangerously close to doing that now. So you could pay like 3, maybe 4 for a short time, but that's kind of about all you can get away with. And Neuzil's got a tremendous opportunity here to earn a large extension, and to cement himself as an NFL starter, which as a UDFA guard prospect to NFL starting center, very impressive. No matter what happens, like I think Neuzil's career arc is remarkable. So props to him.
Yeah, he'll go down in history at Appalachian State. He's probably going to be one of the most successful athletes to come out of there for the league. Just like you said, when you look at like what he's been able to overcome to get to this point, it is quite impressive. And with that being said, I would probably say that I think this is like the boldest move that the Falcons are pulling off this year, and it's going to be really interesting to see, what does 17 games of Ryan Neuzil look like. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but there were struggles running to the left. I think when we look at Neuzil, what separates him from Dahlman is the run game. As pass protectors, kind of felt like they were, on a similar level. They both struggled with the same thing, which bigger nose tackles, bigger DTs, gave them issues, guys that had length, stuff like that. So you, at least from a coaching standpoint, understand the problem and understand how to deal with it, because you've been dealing with it for, a couple of years now. I think that the real reason I look at this as probably the most risky move is that inside pressure, in my opinion, is going to be the thing that affects Michael Penix the most as a quarterback, because it's going to flush him outside of the pocket and throw on the run. And that is the biggest hole in Penix's game. It's one thing when the pressure comes from the outside and Penix is forced to step up. He excels at that. We watched him handle pressure from the edge really well last year, in my opinion, and he showed the ability to navigate the pocket well and move up. But when you can't move up and when you have to move back side to side, It's a little bit more difficult for some quarterbacks, and he's one that we've seen it in college and in the league that, it gives him a little bit more trouble. And that's not like some unique thing. I'm not hating on Michael Penix. It's just kind of the reality of, playing the position. For some guys, they all deal with different pressure struggles, in their own ways. And I'm really hoping that, we see Neuzil be able to give us the performance that we saw as a pass protector last year and be able to be a stable spot for the interior O-line, because that's just going to be really important to your quarterback. It's Michael Penix's first year starting. It's Neuzil's first year starting. That relationship is very important. Who's going to be the communicator? Who's going to be calling out pass protection? How is that going to work? The relationship between the center and the quarterback is special and unique. And it's not always the same on every team. So it's going to be interesting to see, the responsibilities that Neuzil's given. Is he going to get to be like Dahlman and have that amount of control? Do they want Penix to have that level of control? Is it going to be shared responsibility? So kind of looking forward to see, through camp, and then just kind of talking to reporters, figuring things out, how those two are gelling and how, they're all gelling, because we have to be able to run left. We have to be able to run right. We need to be able to function, completely as an offense.
Yeah. That's going to be critical. And, it's interesting because Neuzil and Penix were probably practicing together like almost all of last season, and they never really got to play together. It's kind of funny. Because by the time Dahlman was back, by the time Penix actually saw the field, so we don't actually know. But I do wonder if because there were some minor hiccups and things with Neuzil stepping in with Kirk, and obviously I think Kirk was a difficult quarterback to block for because again he couldn't really move. So that limits his options for escaping, and
that's being generous.
That's being generous,
because again, this man had a 99.01% no scramble rate. That's
elite.
Unheard of. Only quarterback in the league that was touching those numbers. So these guys are literally defending a statue last year.
Yeah. So that is challenging. That's part of the puzzle here. But Neuzil, as a pass protector, just 10 pressures allowed in how many pass blocking? 346 pass blocking snaps, 10 pressures, 1 sack, and 2 hits. That's it. The other 7 were hurries. So that's good. Now 7 penalties. You don't love that, but you especially in such a small game sample size. But again, it's hard to block for a statue and take the hold. Don't give up the sack. It's just better, right? You should always take the hold instead of giving up the sack. So I think that's okay. There were some false starts, but again, when you're stepping in for the first time as a backup center with a quarterback that you haven't really practiced with, I mean, that can happen. So I do think some of that stuff with the false starts and snap issues is less likely to replicate with Penix. I think it's probably a lot more likely that Neuzil is more comfortable working with Penix than he was with Kirk. Even though he spent, a bunch of games with Kirk, he was probably practicing with Penix for most of the season otherwise. So, I think that the Neuzil and Penix probably have a more, a stronger relationship than you might think for two guys that haven't really played any snaps. I think he technically played 5 snaps at the end of the Giants game or something like that. But, that doesn't really count. So I think that they'll be fine. I think Neuzil will be fine. But is fine enough for this offensive line that is going from fine or is fine coming from elite run blocking in terms of Drew Dahlman. So really with Neuzil, it's can you make your pass blocking a strength to where you're just known for your pass blocking? Because if you're not going to be a great run blocker, you probably need to. If you're going to be an NFL starter, that means you need to be a great pass blocker. Or just round out the run game more. And then you can be sort of, maybe you can aim for that, just being a little bit above average at both, and that makes you an NFL starter. So we'll see how that develops. But I agree with you that this is kind of the boldest move they could make, and I wonder if they felt better about it given how much time Penix has actually spent with Neuzil throughout, training camp and all that last year.
Yeah, and, I think that... we talked about it at the beginning. It's 4 out of the 5 guys. It's really 5 out of the 5. These guys have all played together. These guys played half a season starting together. So there is a continuity factor that comes over. And when every O-line group is asked or questioned about what is the thing that matters the most to them, it is that continuity. And when you run a zone scheme where everybody's steps, it's really a dance. It's really a choreography, like these zone schemes, because feet and steps all need to be in sequence. Everybody needs to, be on the same kind of angle, the same trajectory, the path, and everything like that. So I do think that we are maybe underrating just a little bit of that factor in knowing that these guys have at least a certain level of comfort of playing with one another, and that we're not starting completely from scratch like we would be if Dahlman just walked and like we didn't see anything from Neuzil. That would have really made this the boldest move that they could have possibly pulled off.
Yeah.
But they at least got an 8-game sample size, which is more than they've gotten from other positions that they've felt comfortable rolling into the next season with. So hey, maybe 8's the magic number.
Yeah.
And we've got it all figured out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely feel better having seen him for like the majority of the season. Like, I feel like that's a fair amount. That's enough film to base an idea off of that it makes sense to me. But maybe the boldest thing is that the depth behind, or lack thereof, Ryan Neuzil. So like, that's probably the most surprising part of this is like, if you want to go with the young gun, in Neuzil, who's not super proven, but like proven enough that you're like, okay, we'll give you a shot. Then it's typical to be like, okay, well, we're going to bring in like sort of a veteran, like fringe starter to back you up. And just in case we need to go to that guy. That has not happened. That is not the case. And I do think that's likely to change. But as of now, it looks like the backup center battle is somewhat crowded with guys like Javon Gwynn. I believe Michael Gonzalez played center at some point. Matthew Cindric played center.
Gray.
Yeah, Josh Gray. So this is a lot of guys, none of which I think have any NFL experience playing center, except Javon Gwynn briefly. And I would think you probably want to not reference that film. But what do you think about the decision so far to have not brought in a veteran backup for Neuzil and sort of leave it up to these other young guns to sort it out?
Yeah. How you said they like Kyle Hinton too much earlier. That's how I feel about Jonathan Gwynn. It's time to give the Gwynn project up, in my opinion. But they're gonna let the boys battle it out. Like, I just don't see it from Gwynn. But that doesn't mean that he can't turn it around. Neuzil did not look great in years past either, when he was kind of going out there. But with time and development, things can change. I am interested in Joshua Gray out of Oregon State. Has the tackle experience, played guard last year, and was playing the center position while he was at the All-Star East-West Shrine Bowl week. So he practiced there all week. Marquise got a good look at him when he was there coaching. So, maybe he put in a good word, liked what he saw, liked how he competed. I thought he competed well, but you definitely saw a guy who it's his first time playing center, and it's a big shift. And at least it's good to know that he isn't going directly from tackle to center, and he has that year of interior play at guard, because he kind of has to be able to understand, one, playing DTs versus playing defensive ends and outside linebackers, just kind of like all the differences that come with that. But he's somebody that's a little bit interesting. We've got Dwayne Ledford's boy out of Louisville. I think it was one of the last players that he ever actually recruited. Michael Gonzalez. That's a really interesting UDFA. I'm like, okay, that feels like Dwayne like calling his own shot there, and like they asked him, try to get him a guy that he could see. It is interesting. I kind of forgot about it, but there was like a big stink made originally at the Combine that the Falcons didn't have anybody there. The Falcons didn't have anybody at Combine. Well, it turned out the Falcons were running the O-line drills. So Ledford got to look at all of the O-line prospects that came through the Combine this year. And so I think that, he took that information with him into the offseason, and, the coaching staff did what they could to get him people he would like. Cindric's interesting to me. Don't really know anything about him. I know he's from Cal. He's like a lighter weight guy. I feel like all of our centers are kind of this smaller mold, which is like a little old school. Like, I feel like current centers are kind of in between, they're built more like guards where they, guys are kind of being able to get kicked in and out a little bit more, but you would never kick any of our centers out. Like these guys, like you wouldn't even kick out Gray. But like there's a reason that he made that switch from tackle to guard while in college. So it's a really interesting kind of like, they have a type for sure when it comes to the center position. And I don't know if it's my type, but they've been making it work and it's been getting the job done. So, I'm not gonna, tell Dwayne Ledford, how to develop guys because he's been showing us he knows how to do it. And hopefully someone behind Neuzil shows them something, because if we have a situation like last year where we lose the starting center for half the season, I'm definitely a lot more concerned this year than I would have been then.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and I do think it's likely that we're gonna get some kind of veteran in here. Now the pickings are pretty slim right now, because David Andrews retired.
It was like half of them retired.
Wes Schweitzer, the reunion, he retired. And I'm gonna throw a name out there, Dalton Reisner. Now everyone knows Dalton Reisner played offensive tackle his last 3 years in college, and then played guard in the NFL. He also was an All-American center his freshman year. Now, this is how slim the pickings are. Now, Dalton Reisner's like a decent starter. Don't get me wrong. Like he hasn't played center since 2015, but he has played center in the past. And I wonder if, he's already had to move inside because of, he's not built for tackle, but he's definitely a lot bigger than any of the centers the Falcons brought in, to play center. So, I don't know. And we know, Reiser could be a great backup player because he could play all the positions. We know he could play tackle. We know he could play guard. Can he still play center? I mean, you don't forget, I mean, I'm not expecting great things, but we're talking about backup center here. So, I mean, I would be happy to bring in Reisner as just sort of a jack of all trades backup that can just give you a little bit, maybe more reliability than the current caliber of backup center that they have. But I mean, I guess these guys have played center more recently than Reisner technically. So I don't know if any of these guys were All-American, centers, but Reisner was a good center at one point. So there is that. We're not going back to high school days or anything here. So, but yeah. Other than that, I don't really have any good good suggestions for what they could do at center. They're just gonna have to battle it out. So,
yeah, they're gonna,
can Wilkinson play center?
Climb out of there? Yeah, maybe. It's gonna get interesting because we talked about them. And just all of the alignment that they have on this roster, it's going to be a big group that they have to cut down. And maybe when they cut it down, they're like, Elijah Wilkinson's too valuable to let hit the practice squad. We know somebody's going to try to sweep him up. We're just going to have him fold in and be that center, or whether it's Hinton or something like that. So they're definitely going to have to game this group and really figure out who they feel, the safest with letting hit that practice squad because – we've talked about it, but the Falcons have kind of done a really good job at showing that they can develop, they can get guys to plug and play. And so I think at some point, teams across the league are going to be like, yep, we'll take that guy that's been sitting on your practice squad for a couple of years now. He seems like he's ready to go. We'll take this guy. So you got to always be ready for, teams poaching your talent and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the look of the depth here. I think that's kind of the main takeaway. And I like the look of the starters too. I think it's just interesting that the most unsettled starting spot also has the most unsettled backup spot. I'm sure there won't be any catastrophes that befall that position group. At least I hope. I'm sure. But
any theories, Kevin, on why it took Neuzil so long to sign that tender? It was the question of the early summer, late spring. Nobody understood what was going on.
Well, they were even late to report the tender was given out. I mean, it was I waited 15 minutes after the deadline. I was like, okay, I guess they didn't give him the tender. That's crazy. And then they were like, oh no, we did. Yeah, we just let the NFL's transaction wire report it. It's not like he's our starting center or anything. So it might be worth publishing this information somewhere. But yeah, I guess not. So I don't know. I don't know if it's in that vein where they're just like, oh yeah, we're just not we don't really care. I mean, it didn't seem like it was anything weird on Neuzil's part because he was showing up to all the workouts, having not signed the tender. So, I'm not sure what was going on there. It is odd to me though. It's
Yeah.
like I don't know why. Like if it's not contentious, like, I mean maybe the team like asked him to hold off signing it because they were seeing if maybe they wanted like when they did the extension, right? So
Yeah, he did get
maybe
a second year. He
so
got
maybe
more than
that's
like just normal
maybe it
2
was
years.
just sort of like we're gonna work this out. Just don't like just hold off signing it and we'll just we'll figure this out. Um,
Mhm.
maybe there was like minor cap space related reasons like they didn't want the because I mean maybe they didn't want the tender to hit at that particular moment or something. I don't know. But yeah, I'm glad they got it done. That was a little.
They need at least one guy.
Yeah, they need at least one center. I mean, that you can't go in with no centers, but just play 3 guards. Why not? Yeah, we got a lot of guards, so that's all. May have to go there at some point. But yeah, as a whole, how do you feel about this O line group? You think they could reprise their like top 10 status this year, even with the moving to Neuzil at center?
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. I think like at worst you're looking at like a top 15 group. And like that's me like expecting like that'd be a pretty big, I think, fall off if like they're sitting as the 15th best O line in the league. When they should probably be like, 10th at worst. But I think that they can definitely still, get into that range and be that good of a group. There's really nothing out there that makes me feel like that they shouldn't be able to do that. The play calling should be better in year 2, right? We talked about we should be seeing a more diverse run scheme. They've got a quarterback back there who's not statuesque. He can move. He's more mobile than, it's funny, like people talk about Michael Penix is not that mobile. I'm like, yeah, well, in the first game he had a rushing touchdown and I watched him break out of a sack and throw an incompletion. That's more mobility and sack avoidance than we've seen all year from Kirk. So they're going to get a boost from the QB play. They should get a boost from the play calling. So there is really, when I look at them, like, yeah, I have high expectations for them as a unit because this should be, a better year, a better season. That with the coach now in the scheme, when you get that continuity of just kind of like getting that same playbook and just getting some extra stuff added to it, all of those things help. So we're not learning a new playbook. We're not learning new coaches and everything like that. And credit to, Raheem for really, I think, pushing to keep Dwayne, and credit to Robinson too, because coaching is a very egotistical world. And he definitely could have told Raheem, like, no, I want my own guys. Like I'm an OC. I want to be able to have like the people that I want and everything like that. So, credit to all these guys for putting egos aside and, not worrying about who was here before and just focusing on keeping things going and improving this O-line. So excited for what they have the ability to do this upcoming year.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think it's a good group. It helps a lot to just insert one new star. Like if we're gonna take a chance, do it when you've got 4 guys you feel good about, like all around him, right? That can help him. So it's a bold choice. They did need to find ways to cut costs, right? I mean, with how much they're paying Kirk, and they'll be set up sort of to make a change at multiple offensive line spots next year if they want to. Caleb McGarry and Neuzil's spot, and we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But I do think right now this is one of the most consistent and good groups on the offensive line. They all feel pretty good, honestly. The offense as a whole. I think this show wraps up our whole offensive preview. I think we feel good about the offense. They're going to need to be the engine yet again, and hopefully they just won't have this sort of commonplace mid-season slump that just kills their momentum and makes it really hard to make the playoffs. And I do feel good about this offense as a whole. I think this offense should be good enough. Hopefully better than good enough, but I the offense is going to be able to get them in the right position. Now we just need the defense to do enough. The defense could just be enough. That would be great. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, if the offense is the engine, the defense is the transmission, and we got to get out of first gear. Because if we can't get out of first gear, then it doesn't matter how much horsepower you have. So we just need them to be able to get to second, maybe even get to third gear, and we can get this thing rolling into the playoffs and watch Michael Penix lead us to that glorious Super Bowl.
Yep. I'm just gonna put it on my vision board, and we're gonna get there. Sooner or later. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, there it is. It's in the stars.
You gotta look quickly.
Yeah. It comes fast. It comes and goes. But yeah. Tre'Shon, thank you so much for coming on today. Fun show. Going over an interesting position group, guys. He's Tre'Shon Diaz at Tre'Shon on the Twitters, Tre'Shon.io on Blue Sky. Anything else you're working on you want to let people know about?
No, just always working at the Falcoholic, and just putting out work for you guys. Just ready for this football to get here. Man.
Yeah,
this is the grind. This is the real drag. But you know what? We got a lot of exciting things to look forward to this season. So we're just hoping that it all holds together.
Yeah, we're close. 2 weeks, so guys. Close. We can make it.
We
can make it. We're gonna be okay. We're going to be all right. But
we're going to be posting touchdowns from training camp, incompletions. It's going to be great. We're going to be riling up everybody.
It's going to be fantastic. We're looking forward to it, guys. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, please, if you enjoy the episode, like and subscribe. Go and leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform. It really helps us out. Thank you guys so much. If you want to support the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/falcoholiclive. Get signed up there. Also the YouTube channel memberships. And just a reminder, come out if you're in the Atlanta area or planning to come to training camp. Come out and see us on Saturday the 26th. We'll have more information about that, but it will almost certainly be that day, that evening. May even have another smaller get-together in Flowery Branch after a practice. We're still working through that as well. So multiple opportunities perhaps to come hang out with your favorite. Yeah. We're gonna get that set. Get that. That's the sponsor we really want. That's the white whale of the sponsors. But the wings. Fantastic. So guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Dirty Birds and Brews. Thanks again to Tre'Shon for this episode of Tuesday Takes. See you guys next time. Have a great day, folks.